Hello and welcome to the Hype Math channel. My name is Miss Math, and in today's video, I will be going over a frequently asked question by parents. What math concept should my kindergarten, we're going to go up to fourth grader, know? Now, before we dive in, I would like to give a disclaimer. Number one, this is not an exhaustive list. And number two, this is just basic understanding. Obviously, we have 50 states and each state may have something different that they would want the student to learn, but this is a basic framework, okay? Again, this is a basic framework. So once you see the concepts, you can ask your student's teacher and find out if it aligns with what they're learning in school, or if it's something that you shouldn't worry about, or you would want to prepare them for an upper grade. Just one more time, this is a framework and not necessarily the standard for every single state. It's just to give you an idea, because as parents, there's so many things going on and you may not know every concept that your child is going over. However, you would like to help them. So this gives you a basic foundation and you can build on it or switch some things up. Let's dive in and start with kindergarten. So for kindergartners, basic number sense. They need to know the names of numbers. They need to be able to count the numbers in order. Look at numbers to see which one is smaller or larger. Be able to count the number of objects in a group. Also understand the action of adding and subtracting. And I really want to talk about that a little bit more. I don't want anybody to say, what is my child supposed to add and subtract in kindergarten? It's mostly the action of being able to add something to a group or take away. So it's not them having numbers that they would have to add or subtract. It's the action of understanding. If I have, like, for instance, 5 marbles, I am going to add 3 marbles. That's going to make my number bigger. Or if I still have those same 5 marbles and I am taking away 2 marbles, that is subtraction. Not knowing, they don't necessarily have to know the numbers, but now building up the understanding of adding and subtracting. And lastly, being able to identify basic geometric shapes. Let's talk about first grade. So for first graders, they should be able to count count to or above 100. Understand place value up to the tens place. Add and subtract numbers within 20. And also work simple addition and subtraction equations. And I would also like to explain this. So working equations, you will think about algebra, and that's kind of what it is, having them look at different things just to prepare them for algebraic equations. So what that would look like is, let's say they know that 3 plus 2 is equal to 5. Well, in the equation, it would have 3 plus and then a blank equals 5, and they would have to find the number for the blank. That is an equation. So not anything too crazy, just helping them to think higher level in just being able to count objects and add them together. For geometry, they should still be able to identify geometric shapes and also their contours, like edges, also if they're round, things of that nature. For measurement, being able to tell basic time, that means knowing the longhand and the shorthand and what that means. Measuring lengths, and also being able to compare measurements of objects. Now, let's look at second grade. For number sense, they should be able to create and solve addition and subtraction word problems. Now, you may be asking yourself, Miss Math, what do you mean they would have to create word problems? What they would have to do is, say for instance, have a picture And based on that picture, they can create a word problem or an equation to show they have an understanding of what it means. They would also be applying adding and subtracting to place values, being able to add and subtract numbers within 100, being able to skip count, which is really essential. All of them are, but skip counting is their introduction into multiplication. So being able to skip count by twos, fives, tens, and 100s. Being able to understand and see a number and tell whether it's an even or odd number. Identify 3D geometric shapes, because for kindergarten and first grade, it may be just 2D type objects, but for second grade, it'll be basic 3D geometric shapes they would need to identify. They would dive more into being able to tell time and also being able to measure and estimate lengths, as well as being able to add and subtract those measurements. But again, when you think about it, it's a second grader, so it should be at a basic level, nothing that is really intense. One thing that I will say is, again, this is a framework, not the standard for all grades in every single state. It'll depend. Like, for instance, I live in Texas, so there may be some things that are relevant to Texas that might not be relevant to Louisiana or Mississippi or New York. It's just giving you as a parent an idea so that you can have a talking point for your teacher, because we know that math is a building block. And so if we can help get that good foundation when they're in pre-K or kindergarten, they will have a successful math journey. Now, diving into third grade, they will start with multiplication and division, even dividing within 100. Being able to solve math problems with all of the operations, that means addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Being able to understand fraction concepts, identify and explain patterns, rounding or estimating, and also the order of operations. For geometry, they would be introduced to area and perimeter of rectangles, and for measurement, being able to solve problems involving intervals of time. And you see how it's building up, because first it was telling time, then it was being more advanced in telling time, now understanding how to solve problems when it comes to intervals of time. Also being able to measure and estimate lengths, liquids, volumes, and masses of objects. Now let's take a look at fourth grade. For number sense, again, being able to solve word problems with all operations. Now, one thing I will say about this is it will be not only one-step problems, which is what they're introduced, fourth graders are introduced in the third grade, but also two-step problems as well. Like, they would have to do one step of an operation in order to find that second step. And like, for example, would be, let's say they have a problem saying that Susan bought candy at a store. She had $20. It tells how much the candy is. How much money will she have after paying for the candy? Well, one, Susan would have to add the candy up first. That's step one. And then step two, she would have to take the money that she has and subtract it. That's the second step. So having a good foundation in second grade is basic little word problems, but third grade, it really does. That's where that good foundation needs to be set, because in fourth grade, it's not only one-step problems, but two-step problems as well. Students will have to learn how to divide with the remainder, understand place value for multi-digit whole numbers, up to 100,000, a million, again, depending on the state. They will have to understand or comprehend decimal notations. And for fractions, it's being able to know how to order them, equivalency, and decimal comparison. For geometry, knowing lines of symmetry, rays, congruent shapes, angles, and intersecting lines. And for measurements, this is where measurement conversion usually is introduced, being able, for instance, they have feet and needing to know how to convert it to inches. All right, let's take a look at our last grade, 5th grade. So again, not only would 5th graders have to know how to perform word problems with multi-digit numbers, it will also be with decimals as well, because remember, decimals were introduced in 4th grade most times. Also, being able to add and subtract using equivalent fractions, multiply and divide fractions, and also being able to write mathematical expressions. For geometry, being able to understand volume concepts and also properties of angles. And this is where most times graphing is introduced, where the student will learn and need to understand how to graph points on a coordinate plane. Well, that is it. So if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to comment at the bottom. Don't forget also to like and subscribe to the channel. My name is Miss Math. I will talk to you later.